And now it's Judge Logan's turn.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me here today. I think it was mentioned last week by Marina when we were first conceptualizing having this very innovative court known as community court. They told us go out in the community and see what the reception is from people. And the prosecutor that I was working with, the chief prosecutor I was working with, I don't know if she was affiliated, but somehow or another, this is where we landed when we were just we didn't even have anything written down, those sticks weren't even in the ground. But when we left after talking about how we were going to approach this, we left with 30 volunteers for a program that hadn't stood up. So it's really meaningful to me that I am back here again with all of you. Earlier I said, it's full circle, but what I really am hoping is it's more like Google, that we just keep going around together as we're working on these issues. I am Mary Logan, and I am on the City of Spokane Municipal Court bench in position number 2. And I think it's really important, frankly, to start more in a historical as to why we may land where we are today. And in the criminal legal world, historically, we started in England, where, frankly, there were very harsh consequences in an effort to try to bring people's behavior into what was presumed to be quote-unquote normal behavior. And so things like public executions were meant to be the huge deterrent, steep sentences, the huge deterrent. So people began studying that, researchers who were curious to see what the results were. And what researchers discovered was that these public executions, that was a prime time for the pickpockets and thieves to run amongst the community and missing what was supposed to be the message entirely. A part of those sort of strange concepts is a component of why America is here where we are today and why we separated it off, because that kind of thinking was not really in keeping with where you get good results. People that do research criminal legal programs talk about swift and certain being a really key component for getting results. But what swift and certain disregard are the facts that people have rights, and they have a right to be represented by an attorney, and they have a right to fight any information that's brought against them. And so they may be brought into the system swiftly, and they may know in the future there may be some certainty about what's going to happen. If they don't align, then the results there isn't good results by just there being swift and certain and strict compliance or penalties that come with it. So it was really based upon those sorts of studies and those comparisons that in 2009, when then Mayor Werner stood up the standalone municipal court, the city used to contract for services with the county for their judicial services. And I was an attorney at the time under the district court when the municipal court was a department. Now we're our own branch of government. And under that old system, it was definitely the use of jail and probation terms, and then more jail if those probation terms weren't followed, until it was just this very punitive cycle. I was working in the public defender's office, and so my clientele's income was 125% the poverty guidelines. That's still the litmus test as to whether or not you qualify to have counsel assigned, as if you fall in that financial range. So at that point in time, too, it was before there was state insurance, before Obamacare and Apple insurance was a part of has been a part of our lives. And so this was all out of pocket. Any of those conditions were all out of pocket for people that were just barely scraping by. So, but then they were punished if they couldn't afford to do treatment that was being imposed as a condition that may or may not actually reflect what was going on for that person. So I had that experience over and over and over again with the clientele that I represented. If it wasn't a case I was taking to trial, then we had to try to find ways of mitigating that, what was very severe for them, because each time they went to jail, they lost the opportunity to be employed, they lost connection with family or friends, And they came out of it worse off than they went in, as opposed to the lessons that supposedly are supposed to take place by incarceration. So in 2009, that was my chance. I was voted in by my benchmates as presiding judge, which meant I got to make a lot of decisions. It was always in collaboration with them. It was Judge Staub, who is now on the Court of Appeals for Division III, and Judge Zamblin, who's now on Superior Court. So they're still judges, but they're no longer in the municipal court. But I just learned, I don't know if it's an actual parable, that really reflects on why I do what I do, or why I started what I did. And it's the story of a village that has a river that goes through it. And the villagers were noticing that more and more they had people that they had to collect out of the river that were just coming downstream, and their children and adults, and they had all these services. They had to spend all of this money trying to assist these people getting out and making sure they weren't dying, and over and over and over again, until somebody said, why don't we go upstream and figure out why it is that they're coming into the river? And, a bridge was out or the road was out, and so they're trying to cross over, and that was, the explanation. So that's what I did with the criminal legal system. Having come from, I had been a public defender from 1997 and 2008 when I was appointed to the bench at that point in time. I understood, or I thought I understood, the population that I was serving at that point in time. It was going to be the same population that I was going to be serving as a judge, and I just knew there were more ways to approach this, instead of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So in 2010, I had it came upon me because my probation officer said, look at the National Center for State Courts, see what they're doing. Look at the time it was called the Center for Court Innovation. It's now known as the Center for Justice Innovation. Look at Justice for Vets, see what they're doing. So I did. I got online and I discovered that there was going to be the first convening of the International Community Courts, and it was going to be held in South Dallas, Texas. Sign me up. I want to know. So I went, and the citations that were bringing their individuals into court did not come with the right to have an attorney represent them, because they were only for legal financial obligations. It was just a fine that they had to pay. But if they didn't pay the fine, then a warrant could be sworn out to arrest them. And the one that sticks out in my mind, the infraction was, if you speak Spanish to a law officer, that was an infraction that would nail you with one of these citations. But they were seeing that as a problem, because these fines were not getting paid, and then they were having all these warrants, so they created this alternative. And it was this little bitty courtroom. I mean, it's much smaller than the stage. Judge sat eye level. She still wore her robe, but she sat eye level with them, and she had two doors off to the side. One was community service, and one was social service. But that little bitty courtroom was in this enormous horseshoe-shaped community center called the Martin Luther King Center I have never seen so many resources in one place, and from all levels. City, state, feds. You could get involved with WorkSource, you could get involved with insurance, you could get involved with anything you could possibly imagine that could help lift up a person's life. And instead of you having to take a bus, across town to get there, it was all in the single location. So you just would walk from room to room to room to room. And that was your assignment in order to have these fines relieved and your case closed. And so when I came back to Spokane, I'm like, I think we can do this. Except we don't have a Martin Luther King Center. So how are we going to do that? Which is why one of the outreaches was to come and speak to probably some of you. This was back in 2010, so it was quite a while ago. But to all the social service providers in Spokane. So we sent out an invitation, 100 invitations. Washington State University gave us a room, an auditorium, and we presented what we were going to do. This was after we had already talked to the Downtown Spokane Partnership about what we were doing, because at that point in time, some of the similar issues that we're having here today of the houseless not having someplace to go and interfering with some of the businesses downtown. We have to have a flourishing business downtown. Our city depends on the tax income, and I recognize that. However, there has to be a better alternative than just incarceration. So Downtown Spokane Partnership saw this as a real good thing. The service providers were a little reluctant because they were afraid that their caseloads would exceed that which they already had. And I said, I will make you this promise. I believe that you might have a lot of people written on, penciled in on a book where they're supposed to show up for appointments, but I bet you they're not showing up. Whereas we're going to hold court in the library, and you are going to be 10 steps away from where their case is being adjudicated. They go through an agreement, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. And one of their conditions is to meet their needs, meet with you, so that when they go into that door, they don't have to take a bus, they don't have to go across town, they don't have to wake up at a certain hour, because it's all happening with as low a barrier access as we could possibly create by having them all sitting in that other room. And I guaranteed them, I said, if this is instead compounding your problems, then we will sit down and talk about that, because that's what a collaborative, cooperative relationship is when you are imposing on people, right? They didn't have to show up. They are not getting paid any extra money, but they are doing the work that they have been paid to do, and now they have somebody sitting directly across from them and actually addressing those issues. So we have court every Monday. I'm going to get down into the specifics of how it works. We have a working relationship with the police department. We have crafted a map, a geographic zone that feeds into community court, and they are direct cited to us. They do not have to participate in this program. Their case still exists, so if they say no, then their case is transferred to what is known as our Alpha Court, where it's across the river in the main courthouse. But they are, because these are criminal charges, they are still guaranteed the right to have their case screened by defense, and they have an attorney that represents them. The public defender's office is working with us. We think we have between 2 and 3 public defenders that are down at the library. We know this is a population that automatically qualifies because they are definitely the 125% below poverty guidelines. And the reason why that's important is because the Constitution is important. The rule of law is important, and we continue to uphold that even in community court. So that's the first screening. Is this a viable case? The swiftness, this is something that I didn't mention earlier this morning, but the swiftness about this is that these are within days they are coming into court. It's not a month from when the case was charged. It's within days. Enough time for the report to be exchanged from prosecution to defense, so the defense has something to read to determine whether or not it's a viable case. And some cases are not viable. Many cases can be dismissed because the police officer didn't meet all the, you think of it as a recipe, we call it the elements of the crime. But if you don't have flour, sugar, butter, salt, baking powder, and a little vanilla, then you don't have a cake. But likewise is true for crimes, because there are those elements that are involved in it, that recipe. And so those cases get dismissed. Those cases that withstand the scrutiny, they are offered the opportunity to come into community court. The attorneys are very frank with them, whether or not this is a case that's a triable case or not. And if they don't believe it's a triable case, then they can opt into community court. The next step is they are then handed off to one of our community justice counselors, which is what we have rebranded our probation department, because the entirety of municipal court is attempting to approach the people that come into this criminal legal system in a more therapeutic manner in an effort to get them out of the system, not keep them cycling through. So they sit down with this person, and we use a validated evaluation tool called a CCAT, which is a criminal court analysis tool. And there's, I think, 15 to 20 questions on it, everything from substance use to trauma to mental health to living circumstances. Those questions then result in a determination on a resolution. They then sign an agreement. It's called a stipulated order of continuance, and in order to satisfy that agreement, they need to meet the needs that have been expressed by virtue of that evaluative tool. If there is a trauma or mental health issue, then we expect them to have a trauma or mental health evaluation and follow through with treatment. If it's a substance use disorder, we expect them to have that evaluation and follow through with the treatment. We expect them to perform community service. If they're not physically able, then Community Minded Enterprises has given us tablets, and they get an education session instead on perhaps the subject matter that may have brought them in, or something that informs them in a way to get them out of the system. And then the other accountability piece, some people want to define accountability as how many times do they go to jail. But for me, accountability is when you recognize that you have a problem or you've created a problem and then you take steps to remedy it. That is what we do. We take steps to remedy their issues so that they get out of being on the streets. They're being charged with sit and lie. They're being charged with trespass. They're being charged sometimes theft, although not as many times as you would think, and camping. And so we are trying to get them out into a more healthy life than what they came with. That is our goal, to better them. If I threw them in jail on those same cases, which happens, their jail sentences are definitely issued on these, then they go to jail. And when they come back out again, they have lost any of the insurance they may have had. They have lost any of the services that they may have. They have probably lost whatever backpack or other belonging that they had. And they are in a worse position than when they entered. Sometimes jail is used to stop behavior. We use it sometimes when someone has been a little reluctant. They haven't gone to treatment, for example. And so I sit down with them and say, so you can either take control of your life or I take control of your life. And your options right now are these that are on the table. It's time for treatment. And if you're not willing to do that, then what you've said is, because you signed that agreement that said you would, that's a violation. We want you to get engaged in treatment. So if jail is the thing that happens at that point, within days we are transferring them to inpatient treatment, if that is the subject matter, or they are days being transferred to getting help with mental health or trauma issues. So, and they have to come every Monday, which I can tell you that in our regular court, cases are continued out 6, 8, 10 weeks before they come back, and then that's another period of time. Although we're working on limiting that as well. That's another component of what we're doing in municipal court, is shortening that time frame. But there's no immediacy. What the studies talk about, that swift uncertainty, is it just doesn't apply for lots of reasons. But we make them show up every Monday and stand and deliver. Did you do any community service? Because that's a component here. If they didn't do at least an hour, which I require every week, then we have a vest and we have a sweeper and we send them out straight from the library. The Downtown Spokane Partnership is still one of our partners since the very beginning, since 2013, and gives them an area to go clean up, and then they come back and they have satisfied that particular condition. Or have they met with their treatment provider? Have they been engaging in doing the testing that's required? Every Monday, that's what's required of them. I relate this, not very many people quite understand what that is, and so for me, like, I'm a runner, and I know that if there is less of me pounding the pavement, then I'm gonna go faster. Weight Watchers has created this entire industry based upon the fact that we need to be held accountable. So in Weight Watchers, it's like, stand at that scale, and you're like, right? Looking for the number to go down. For us, it's showing up and engaging in the things that's going to bring you out of the system. There are 2 documents at the back for your perusal. One is our statistics. I know one of the biggest complaints that has been, frankly, falsely registered is that there's no data. First of all, in 2019, Washington State University was hired by the executive branch. The city administrator at the time, Teresa Sanders, was able to carve out in their parlance budget dust in the amount of $30,000 to have this evaluation undertaken. And let me just for a second go down a tiny rabbit hole with that. The court doesn't have its own money. We only get whatever the legislative branch gives us, and I can tell you that what we are 98% people. So all of these extras are not things that are included in our budget. Somebody else has to pay for it. And if you self-evaluate, chances are you're probably going to say, we're doing great, right? Because there's that bias. There just really is that bias, and that's why you look for outside entities to undertake those evaluations. So WSU was looking for 2 major topics. One was, are you following your policies and procedures? And did you have a positive effect on recidivism? And the answer to both of those questions was yes. They also had some suggestions, things that we have already incorporated or began incorporating as soon as the study came out. So yes, we're continuing to follow our policies and procedures, and we have had some major, amazing enhancements that make our program even stronger. Two of them in particular, one of them came out of a bad thing, which is it was good because it resulted in the opioid fund money being given to the communities that were impacted by opioids, and we certainly are one of them. So the city and county received some money, and the city carved out a portion of that to work or to retain consistent care, which is being run by Dr. Darren Nevin. Dr. Nevin has worked with the community court program since we stood up, but he has brought to us now what is considered to be the gold standard in therapeutic courts, because he provides medically assisted treatment for our community court participants if they're willing to be a part of our program. And he also brings antipsychotics, because we know approximately, I think it's 58% of the total that come in are struggling with substance use disorders, and just shy of 40% are coming in with trauma or mental health issues. So really big issues that we really need to address to stabilize so they have the ability to make their way out of the criminal legal world. And he offers that up at the library. The other, and it's actually, we have three things, because two of them, the other one is that our therapeutic court coordinator created a case management system, which means a person, and actually had two people until budgets made one of them go away, who were there throughout the week. So we're there on Monday, very robust, all the providers, all of the strength and cheer that you can, and the expectation that you're doing things. But then Tuesday through Sunday hit, and the case managers are at least available until Fridays. We are now also creating an MOU with Pioneer Human Services, because they have a navigation system that has been funded by the state. And they sought us out because they need people to navigate, and we need navigators, so it's this beautiful combination that will enhance even more our ability to get people out, because this is a very chaotic community. As was mentioned earlier, I did grow up in a very supportive family, and I know that makes a very big difference in how people make their way through a system. Whenever somebody comes into my regular court and they have family, I always take a moment out to thank that other person for being there, because I know that is the distinction between that population and the people that I am serving in community court. They have a street family that are a little bit doing the same sorts of things, not always so terribly helpful, but by having a case manager who can help lead them along, give them the opportunity to do things, giving them a bus pass, having them get access to, we have a room full of backpacks and clothes and snacks, things that will tide them over until they can get reconnected to maybe their EBT card, their food card, so they have some consistency that way. So we listened to our evaluators. Nobody else has bestowed us with what would now probably cost between $60,000 and $90,000 to have an evaluation, but we would welcome that. There's nothing being hidden. Our court is an open court just like every other court. Anybody who wants to can go down to the library on Mondays and see what we're doing, ask as many questions as you want, and get the information that you would like. So the study that I sat back there is actually a shortened version that evaluated this, what's called a meta-analytic study of 116 studies, people that have no skin in the game, but that are just trying to figure out how to build a better mousetrap, right? I mean, that's what we try to do in the criminal legal world all the time. How do we build a better mousetrap to get people not kill the mice, have them reintegrated into our community, have the people that we're dealing with? And what this meta-study absolutely demonstrated, that tough on crime policies do not work. Jail or prison on jail and prison on top of each other is just going to generate that in the population. They are hanging out with people with the same mentality with jail and prison. They are not learning, how to survive in the world. One of the things that I tell people all the time that I'm dealing with in sentencing is, put me out of business, please. Do the things that help you get out. Let's open the door. They have to do the hard work. And believe me, it is hard work. again, I use running as my backstop on comparison. And, I've run 5Ks, 10Ks, 15Ks, 25Ks. I ran a marathon only once, will not do that again, because it's hard. It requires a kind of discipline that consumes your life. And so that is what our participants are really on. They are on marathons. They do have helpers. They have someone giving them a water bottle as they're making mile 5, somebody giving them a bar at mile 6. That is what we are doing. So I encourage you to look at that. This is a summary. It does have a reference to the link if you want to look at the full study. But this was and it's from Conservatives for Criminal Justice Reform, so that's why I picked it, because I didn't want it just to come from what you would expect, right? What I'm talking about here is that jail begets jail. The other is our statistics. So understand this, courts collect data, we collect data. We do not generate reports. I mean, that's not a component of what we do. So if somebody says, let me look at your files, they're not going to get very much information. But we do. We have been collecting that. And Sarah Thompson, our Therapeutic Court Coordinator, we periodically appear in front of City Council. We had not been invited for a few years to do that. In the past, we had provided quarterly reports. We're back in that game again. And it isn't a game, don't get me wrong. So what I'm providing to you, and again, those are the stats that are back there from January to August 31st of this year, that we had 98 graduations. Not all of our agreements are 12 months in duration. Some of them are 4 months, some of them are 6 months, and some of them are 12 months, depending on the needs of the person and their ability to make their way through. But 98 people graduated, which means that at a minimum, they're at least housing ready. I can't withhold graduation to somebody simply because they didn't get housed, because in this community we are so sorely behind in our housing. Depending on who you listen to, at a minimum we're 22,000 units of housing behind. That's from the Spokane Housing Authority. There's another group that has done a study that says we're 33,000 behind. No matter what, we are in a huge deficit. And that's for people that can really truly afford to pay the rent that exists right now. The participants in my court are making bare bones at most whatever the minimum that Social Security would provide them. And these days, that does not pay a month's rent. So it has to be working with landlords that are willing to have a few less money, frankly. Catholic Charities has worked it out. I'm not really sure. The people that are in any of those havens are paying because they have a source of income and they are on a lease with them. So it's not free that they are staying there. So there are ways of doing that I hope we can figure out. But on the other side of that too, we had 556 bench warrants that were issued, people that didn't show up. So the biggest complaint, again, accountability. Well, I am holding them accountable. If you don't show up in my court and you've been ordered to do so and they're given it right on their ticket and the officer says go to the library on Monday and they don't show up, then a warrant is issued. Now, if they come the following week and they're willing to participate, yeah, we're going to withdraw that warrant and we're going to bring them in and we're going to try to work with them. Because to do otherwise is, again, the very definition of insanity, which is the same thing over and over without a different result. I know that we had 43 participants entered into a 28-day inpatient treatment program. Some of those through consistent care and some of those through just up as a component of the agreement that we've created. On another good side, 1,856 court appearances. That's what happens when somebody has to come once a week as opposed to once every 6 or 8 weeks. So those statistics are back there. The other is we served up 3,322 lunches. All of those are contributions by Lourdes Catholic Church. It is a part of their mission to serve, and they got themselves in a situation where they really wanted to hand some of this off, and so they stepped up and they have consistently been providing lunches. Because for me, because food is so important. I mean, it's important to all of us, and I know for the population that I'm serving, every day they have to figure out where am I going to get my next meal, and I did not want that to be one of the issues that was, that they had to consider when they were coming to court. They get a sandwich, they get fruit and cookies and something to drink, and that's a guarantee. Want me to stop? I can stop. I can stop at any point in time because I could talk about this until tomorrow. I warned the morning group that I could continue to talk about it until you all showed up, so I will step back. If there are any questions, I'm happy to attempt to field them. Yes?
How many people show up each Monday?
So our docket, usually these days, is somewhere around 100. And I would say that roughly, on average, we have about 70 people showing up every Monday. Some are new, but many of them are because they're already on those agreements and they're supposed to be showing up. Yeah. Yes?
What kind of response have you got from the newest to the area, so I don't know all the terms, from the Downtown Business Coalition?
I'm sorry.
The Downtown Business Coalition, what kind of response are they giving you with the type of court you're running?
They want me to cure all of it. And so, I mean, that seriously, I've just had the pleasure of meeting one of them, and he claimed me to be the problem. But I can't cure the housing issue. And I can tell you there are no therapeutic courts that are the cure to any of them. We have a DUI court, and yet, like, I just fielded a DUI warrant call. The officer needed to draw blood, and you have to have a warrant in order for that to take place. They are just opportunities for us to take away those people that are able to work through a system that has a little bit more discipline in it and work through those issues. But I can't cure housing. Like, I have a pretty good skill set, but I don't know how to build houses, and I don't know how to fill that particular niche.
My question insinuated that you have no houses. I was just more curious, are you getting a positive response from the business community? Are they supportive, I guess, is more my question.
No, they are not. The Downtown Spokane Partnership has been. They've continued to send somebody to assist us for community service, but they don't want them downtown. They don't.
We have time for one more question. I think Tom has one in the back.
You mentioned your funding comes from other places, obviously, city and the county, I suppose, being primary?
No.
No?
I stood this program up without a dime. I stood this program up at reallocating resources that already exist. I already existed. The Defense Council did, prosecution did, probation did, the resources already did. It was just a matter of putting it at a time and a place where they would show up there instead. A docket. I created a docket.
Then a follow-up for clarification, do you feel over the next year that whatever funding sources there are, these other groups, is that in danger? And is there a way that any of this could possibly influence any perceived kind of danger that you see with regard to funding and participants?
Yeah, the biggest one is the Medicaid, because if there's not insurance, then there's no way to pay for this treatment. When we stood up was when Obamacare had just burst on the scene, and it was truly a blessing that no one could have ever anticipated, because again, these are not, they don't have insurance, they're not working, it's not a part of their job package, and so if there isn't that support, then it will disappear, and it will become even worse than it is right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah.